everyone, Professor Philip Travis here. And this week, since we have our paper assignment this week, I want to take a second and talk about writing history ethically, the ethics of writing history, and particularly as it relates to the issue of plagiarism. So I just want to give us a clear explanation of what plagiarism is and how we can avoid this. So the basic definition of plagiarism is taking someone else's work and putting it off as your own. It's basically stealing someone else's creative work. And so in that sense, it's a very serious thing, and all colleges and universities take plagiarism very, very seriously. In addition to that, aside from like the issue of, stealing someone else's work, of taking someone else's copyrighted information and creativity, it's also a really flagrant example of cheating, which is another reason why colleges and universities are really focused on trying to prevent students from plagiarizing, particularly by hopefully teaching us what this is and why we shouldn't do it. And so there'll be a short quiz, and if you're watching this video, you'll have no problem doing well in this quiz, but there'll be a short quiz on this video because this is very important. So the most overt form of plagiarism is the case of a student literally copying somebody else's work, whether it's copying, pasting something from an internet source or writing it word for word from a text. That is a very, very overt case of plagiarism. Should never, ever, ever be doing something like that. I think anytime somebody is taking something word for word, whether it's copying or pasting, they know this is plagiarism. They know that this is not something that is consistent with ethical academic actions as a student, or anyone else for that matter. Some other examples, though. So when we're writing a paper, of course, the goal should be to put things in your own words, right? So when you approach a paper, read the material, skim it if you have to, go through it, understand it, that you're using to research the paper. Take your topic area, go through the material, understand the material, think about it, and then write the paper in your own words. And when you are using information that is specific from the material that you're using, cite it. Always, always cite. So when in doubt, cite the paper. One of the more common mistakes of students when writing papers is infrequent citing. So you don't just cite a paper when you've used a direct quotation. You don't just cite a paper when there's something really specific. Anytime you are paraphrasing information, drawing specifics that are not common knowledge from another source, you need to cite it. Now, when you cite the paper, if you only use one source for that paragraph, you only have to cite at the end of the paragraph. If you use multiple ones, then you have to cite at the end of each sentence that the source is being used from. And of course, if you ever use a direct quote, obviously direct quotes need to be cited. But again, if you're only using one source for the paragraph, only at the end of the paragraph. For a paper of this length, quotation should be used very, very sparingly. So the most sort of egregious and overt form of plagiarism is directly copying and pasting someone's work, word for word. However, if you are taking information from a source and you're writing that information even in your own words and not giving it credit, technically that is also plagiarism. You need to cite where that information came from. So the last example I also want to mention here is using your work that you used in a previous class in another class. That's also something that we should not be doing, and it's sort of like a case of plagiarizing yourself. When you have an assignment for a class, if you think that you could somehow make an assignment for a previous class work in there, and you take a paper that you wrote for another class and try to turn it in as though you did it in the current class, that too is a form of cheating and unethical academic activity for written assignments. So don't do that. If it's a similar topic, you need to find a way to come at it from a different angle and make sure that your work is being written originally from the standpoint of the assigned materials in the class that you're in at this time. So there's kind of three aspects here. One, the overt, never, ever copy and paste somebody else's work directly. That is an overt, egregious case of plagiarism. More commonly, students will paraphrase, because remember, again, read the material, skim the material you're using, then put it in your own words. Think about it for yourself, put it in your own words, and as you're writing it, cite the sources, the areas with page numbers where you're drawing those ideas from, okay? An error that students often make is, to not cite enough, to have a paragraph where they're talking about something related to, the development of the two-party system during the 1790s with arguments over the Jay Treaty and the positioning of the capital in Washington, D.C., for example, and not citing that paragraph. That stuff's not common knowledge, so you need to cite it. So when in doubt, cite. Always cite where your information is coming from. Put it in your own words. Paraphrase in your own words. Use quotations as sparingly as possible. And also, don't submit something that you've written for another class. That's also an example of cheating. It is theoretically also an example of plagiarism. So don't ever use a previous written paper and just try to turn it in as though you did it for that class. That's also a form of cheating. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the ethics of paper writing. When in doubt, cite. Put it in your own words. Never copy and paste. And remember, cite as frequently as is possible. And don't try to submit assignments from other classes. Stick to those basic guidelines, and I think you'll be fine to write a paper that is your own paper, and that's really what we're going at here. So let's have a great week, and let me know if you have any questions.